Hello, and welcome to our podcast, The House of Family Therapy, faculty, friends, and a little bit of fun on the world of systemic and family therapy featuring the therapist. In an era of prolific podcasting, there are so many amazing therapists offering important and valuable thoughts and insights into the world of mental health, including many amazing systemic and family therapists. Yet, as two licensed therapists and educators of therapists in training, what often fascinates us most is not those thoughts and insights, but the people themselves, those who have chosen to become systemic and family therapists, whose personal stories have driven them to sit with, hold space for, and be in relationship with others who are struggling and going through hardships. This podcast aims to explore and interview a variety of family therapists in different spaces and places in their personal journeys and careers as family therapists, to highlight their humanity, their passions, their motivations to be helpers and healers. And in true experiential and systemic foundational principles, we hope to do this with a little bit of joy, humor, and laughter. So, Dr. Gutierrez, thank you so much for joining us today on our podcast. We like to get started with some lighthearted, rapid fire questions just to get to know you before we formally introduce our guests. Are you ready?
I am ready as I will ever be, I think.
Awesome. What is your go-to coffee order?
Matcha latte with oat milk or almond milk, dairy free.
What emoji best describes you today and why?
You know, the laugh cry face where it's like the tears streaming down?
Yeah.
That's probably my most frequently used emoji because life right now just feels like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'm a little hysterical in my crying, and it's partly laughing, partly sobbing.
It's very understandable and relatable. What's a surprising thing you have on your bucket list?
I don't think this is very surprising. That's the first thing that popped into my mind. I've been to New York City lots of times. It's one of my favorite places to visit, and I've been through all seasons, except I've never been for like the holiday season.
Mhm.
And I would really just love to be like Rockefeller Center, see the tree light up and just all of that. So it's something that I really want to do one of these holiday seasons in my life.
Kind of that Home Alone moment where they sees the big tree.
Something like that. Although that movie means something different to me nowadays because of, all the things. But
Yeah.
yeah, that moment.
What animal are you and why?
I really love Bengal tigers.
Mm.
Um, I don't know why I would be a Bengal tiger. They're like pack animals. They're very relational. The females are also pretty fierce and protective.
Yeah.
And so I think that really resonates. I also just think they're really pretty.
All right, last one for you at the top here. What's the silliest goal you've ever set for yourself?
In hindsight, it's pretty silly because oh my gosh, was it like so much work? I decided that I would make all of my daughter's baby food
Mm.
from scratch. I would puree and freeze it and all of that, which is great. And I did. I accomplished that goal, but also it was a lot of work, and I mean, babies eat like one ingredient things for a while, so I don't know that it was more for me than for her, I think.
A
Yeah.
lot of work.
So much work. Cleaning the little blenders and all the like silicone things that you freeze it in. It was a lot of work for very little payout.
Not probably a lot of critique either of how good it was or not.
No, no.
Well, I'm going to formally introduce you to our audience now. Dr. Gutierrez is an associate professor and the branch director for the Irvine campus of the CFT program here at Alliant International University. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California and has a group practice in Orange County. She has been working in the prevention and treatment of sexual violence, interpersonal trauma, and chemical dependency within the family for over 15 years. She approaches her teaching, clinical, and community outreach work with an anti-carceral and trauma-conscious lens. So as we move into getting to know you a little bit more and more formally, I wonder if you could talk about your intersectionality or social positioning that you find, really important and meaningful for the work that you do as a family therapist.
I think what usually comes up for me the loudest, we often, when we think about our identities, we identify with our most marginalized parts first. And I think that's really true for me. I am a first generation high school graduate and first person in my family to pursue higher education in general, and only person in my immediate family to go beyond bachelor's degree. And when I say immediate family, I mean like cousins and all that stuff too.
Mhm.
So not having had generational access to higher education is something that like really impacts me, especially being in full-time academia. It's something that's like really on my mind a lot, and it comes up a lot in the clinical space as well, because I find that my clients often have a similar shared experience and even accessing therapy. They're probably the first person in their family to go to therapy. Many of them are also first generation college goers and things like that. And so that social class coming from a lower SES background is something that really motivates me. It is also really central in my practice. I make sure that I do have like pro bono spots on my caseload at all times. I have a very wide ranging sliding scale. So I think it's really important for me to make sure that the kind of like work that I do in the community, I could have accessed myself when I was younger. Now that my socioeconomic status has changed, I want to kind of stay close to that.
Thank you for that. So, we wanted to ask you how you found your way to family therapy.
Um, Being a first generation high school graduate to teenage parents, it was never a question of whether or not I would go to college. I had to go to college. It was just a requirement, even though I had no idea what that meant. And when I was in high school, I was a peer helper. I don't know if y'all had those programs when you were in high school, like peers
Mhm.
helping peers. So
Yes.
I was in the Peers Helping Peers program, and I had this really wonderful high school teacher who was like the mentor for that program that I also TA'd for. And she just like recommended that I go to therapy. I went to therapy as a teenager, like through my school. It was really life changing for me. I always knew that I wanted to do something in mental health, but again, like could not wrap my head around grad school. It was not accessible to me. It was something other people did. So I went to UCSD, got a bachelor's degree in psychology. Like most people with a bachelor's degree in psychology, I worked in business administration for like 8 years and realized it was soul sucking and not me. But I really was scared to go to grad school because it's so expensive and I just didn't really know what to do. Going to an R1 university is very like heavy in research and clinical psychology. I didn't even know what MFT was. No one had introduced me to family systems work or family systems theories. I didn't get introduced to systemic perspective on like mental health and relational wellness until I started volunteering at the Rape Crisis Center. And I was working at the Rape Crisis Center on the hotline and at the hospital. And I was also doing some kind of outreach stuff with victims that were victims of violent crimes. And I had to like support the therapists whose notes had been subpoenaed and things like that to like testify for their clients. And it was talking to the MFTs that I realized, like, oh, this is a whole new thing that I've never heard of before. And it seems to really align with my values and my worldview. And so that's how I got introduced. It was like 8 years after I graduated from UCSD and then finally found my way into the world of systemic therapy.
What do you think has kept you here in family therapy?
The people, y'all, and my mentors. I think the kinds of conversations that I've been having with my mentors and people that have supported me in kind of finding my place professionally. It seems like that conversation is finally happening in wider spaces, but it's been happening as long as I've been talking to systemic therapists. And so I think that like understanding of relationships and systems is really congruent with my worldview. And I think that it's the future of like mental health in general. So it keeps me energized. It keeps me excited to be in conversations with other people that are really not trying to pathologize individuals.
How did you transition to academia?
I had a mentor who wouldn't take no for an answer. I and you both know this person very well. When I was in my doctorate program, there wasn't like a teaching track or any of those things. It was more like people needed TAs and research assistants. And so they kind of like reached out to you. And I had a different mentor that asked if I would support him in teaching the master's level group therapy class. doing like experiential groups, which I really love running groups. I love doing experiential groups. And so I kind of started that way. I also taught lab as a doctoral student to MFT students who are kind of role playing through their theories. It still hadn't really clicked for me that I would ever be in academia until my mentor, who might be on the podcast at some point, Dr. Raji, she just basically said, like, you have to teach. You should do it. You should do it. And I was like, no. And here I am 10 years later teaching
Okay. Wonderful.
still.
Glad to have you. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, what was your journey in discovering your specialties and niche?
Because I started out before I even was in grad school as a rape crisis counselor. It was also the place that I found my people, just like people of all genders, mostly femmes, women and femmes. I really wanted to have conscious discussions about gender and power and intersectionality and patriarchy and all that. It was just like a place that I found access to language I'd never had access to before. Because it's what made me want to be a therapist. I also have like lived experience in that space. I've always known that's where I wanted to be clinically. And then as a trainee, I worked in addiction treatment. And I didn't even know how much addiction was a part of my family genogram until I did my genogram as a master's student. And it just kind of went hand in hand. Like all of my clients, when I was a trainee working in treatment, experienced sexual trauma. So it sort of stuck. And I still volunteer with the Rape Crisis Center. I don't do the hotline at the hospital anymore, but I support them in their 50-hour training that they do twice a year for other people that are coming through to be volunteers.
Wonderful. So, what's new and exciting regarding this specifically of women empowerment, maybe even including background in sexual assault, that kind of work, addiction?
I mean, people are talking about things differently, and the conversation continues like evolve and devolve simultaneously, which is both like really maddening and frustrating, and also inspiring and empowering. It sometimes feels like it's, two steps forward and three steps back in the conversation about gender-based violence and even like binary ideas of gender and gender-based violence. So it's so prevalent, so relevant in everything that we do.
What gives you passion to keep at it?
Rage, I think more
That's
than
a driving
anything.
factor. That's a driving factor. That could be good. You know,
Yeah. Yes,
they always
rage.
say anger is a sign of boundary crossing.
Yeah. And it's like I said before, it's community being in spaces with other people. It's so like multidisciplinary, multifaceted. The spaces like that are really communities of people really trying to create change at all different levels. It's honestly like the thing that saves my mental health to be in conversation and community with other people that want to say hard things out loud and continue to talk about how we all are impacted by these things and also how we perpetuate them.
Kind of transitioning a little bit, if you think about all the pieces, your background, your passions, your topic, and right, we're all faculty. Do you have any like takeaway messages to students or future students about being engaged in this world?
Your story is your superpower. And in our field, we hear like fancy words like countertransference and transference and self of a therapist and all of that. And the things that like draw us to this field are the things that will help us find longevity in the field, like that, like you were talking about, like that passion. For me right now, rage is really close to my experience, but it evolves over time. I feel of like inspiration and hope and all that too. But I think our story, whatever brought us to this place and whatever made us want to be therapists in the first place, is something that we should always go back to and like hold on to. And the way we make meaning of it will definitely change over time. But it's really important to like, I guess not forget where you came from and like hold on to your younger self in those ways. It's been really healing for me. And also it's where I find like the most connection with clients. I know Tabitha, you're also very drawn to experiential perspectives on therapy, and that like really authentic human being kind of space is so powerful. And I think knowing your own story and exploring your own story and exploring yourself as a therapist is, it translates in the therapy room into like more safety for the client. So I think clients can tell when we as therapists are supporting them and doing something that we haven't yet done in our own work. Like there's those barriers, that like kind of intuition, those boundaries that they start to set, or maybe we haven't like walked a certain path in our own exploration. So I think staying close to your story and just always doing your own work and continuing to prioritize your own ongoing healing process is what helps us navigate the systems that we're up against and address things like vicarious trauma and all that.
I really think it's powerful that you're talking about rage, because I think rage gets a really bad rap in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of therapy spaces, right? I talk to my students about anger and rage all the time, but I wonder if you want to speak more on like why rage is okay and why it in this moment for you in this season, like it's top of mind, and how speaking to the rage and existing in the rage is an okay thing and needed sometimes.
Yeah, Ken Hardy actually has been talking about the wound of rage for a really long time in our field of systemic therapy, and the way that he kind of conceptualizes the wound of rage in terms of like racial trauma really resonates with me and the clients that I work with. Obviously, working in substance misuse treatment for such a long time, I've had a lot of clients that have been really racialized, really incarcerated. That's how I kind of like got introduced to and like the idea around like rage as a really relevant and valid source of healing. It came from kind of that work and um, yeah, people like Ken Hardy that have put language to it. And as a person who's experienced gender-based violence and, you know, all of the socialism, the traumatic sexual socialization as a person who's a female, cis woman, like it resonates in a lot of ways too. Like you said earlier, Gita, anger is like your body's way of telling you that your boundaries are being crossed, you know? And so I think kind of giving voice to that is really important. Jennifer Moulin is also talking a lot about rage and decolonizing therapy, and that really speaks to me as well.
What is something a student has told you or taught you that you will never forget?
Oh my gosh, they change me every time, and I like just cried with the second year master's students who finished their last class, sex therapy class, on Tuesday. We were all crying together in our very last like circle group. Just this cohort was so special. They're all special. This cohort was special in that like they just want to do experiential work from the beginning. You know, like usually when you're trying to model like sculpting and things like that, people are so hesitant to raise their hands. And in my chemical dependence class with this cohort, like half the class volunteered to participate in a sculpting exercise. And it was just so moving and impactful. And that's their very first year. And so this is their last class of their last year, and they're all still right there, like wanting to do all experiential work. And they're all so different from each other, but so eager to just be in conversation and community with each other. And it just like always reminds me, you know, to stay close to my people too, and they are my people.
I mean, that's powerful because, as you sort of noted, right, often it's challenging to get people to volunteer to be in those
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, vulnerable spaces, especially early on, and to have that from the get to go. That's a really awesome experience. What is your secret sauce for family therapy? Where's the magic?
The magic is in like acknowledging that the reasons that we want really quick, rapid behavioral change are because number one, suffering is painful, and we care about our relationships, we care about our families, our partners, children, friends, everyone that we're in community with. We care so much about people. We want to alleviate suffering really, really quickly. But that also is like influenced by like our managed care healthcare system and everything. And I think that what has been liberating for me as a therapist is moving away from the idea of coping better. Because to me, coping better is a way of like managing us oppression better.
Mm.
That it's not necessarily about coping better, but like not being so isolated and alone in the pain. So for me, the secret sauce is like getting in the pain, getting in the muck, sitting there and like acknowledging when it feels immovable and scary and messy and shameful and all those things, and just like not being afraid to be in that space and yeah, just witnessing that and letting my own stuff be in my body at the moment too, and healing simultaneously, like alongside clients, and just getting it wrong, giving myself permission to not be perfect as a therapist or as a human, and getting it wrong and saying the wrong things sometimes, like we've talked about before, and then just like healing those ruptures, being accountable to making mistakes as a therapist, I find can be sometimes the most therapeutic thing with clients, because often in our clients' lives, just like in our lives, people with power aren't accountable to how they've created harm. And so being able to like name the rupture in the therapeutic relationship, be accountable to it, and repair from there is also where I think therapy happens a lot.
Yeah, that resonates a lot, because it's kind of like, excuse the slang here. It's kind of like you're willing to get in the mucky muck,
Mhm.
and get in there with the client, which is very beautiful. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our rapid fire family therapy related questions.
Okay.
And Tabitha and I are going to go back and forth. The first one is who is your favorite historical family therapist?
Carl Whitaker is my favorite historical family therapist, although I would never roll around on the floor with my clients. As a parentified child, I don't really know how, well, I take that back. I didn't know how to play until I became an aunt and a mom, and now I'm getting a lot better at like playing in a childlike way. But yeah, I mean, Whitaker really inspires me a lot.
So if you were an intervention, what intervention would you be?
Witnessing, I think. And that is not from symbolic experiential. That is a more of a CLS narrative kind of thing. But witnessing, I think, is really, really powerful. And it's kind of like what I hope to do in my work with clients.
Which theory would you least likely date?
I would least likely date CBT because of all the things I talked about earlier.
Makes sense.
Okay, this one might be a little more challenging, but do you have a favorite therapy or like therapist quote?
It's probably on my mind because I just said his name out loud, and it's also brief. Whitaker would be quoted saying, "I'm just," and I think this is in the Family Crucible, "I am only the most experienced client in the room," right? Like I'm a client too. The only thing that like separates me from you in this process is that I've been a client for a really long time. I've got experience at being a client. And so I think that is what helps me be a therapist.
All right. So this last one is kind of a multiple parter. Yes, I made that word up right now. So, if you had a superpower, what would it be and why? It can't be real, and how would it work?
If I had a superpower, it would be that I could reflect back to people what I see and have them like actually like accurately see what I see in them. That's when I feel the most stuck in therapy, is when it seems like it's so hard for clients to see how amazing and wonderful they are, or their partners are, or their family members are, because they're so like entrenched in like self-doubt and shame and all of that. So if I had a superpower, it would be to like reveal all the like magical unicorn parts of people and that they could actually see it.
Now, here's a follow up question that I'm kind of curious. Are there any limits and boundaries to that?
Well, yes, power, obviously, power and abuse of power could really come into play, because the things that I think are magical and unicorny about people may not actually be their favorite parts of themselves or like culturally relevant for them. So just being mindful of sometimes the things that I like think are awesome and value might actually be through my lens as like a queer cis white woman.
Makes sense.
I'm trying to envision how this works, how you envision this work. Is it like a telepathy thing? Like, I'm going to give you this
Yeah.
vision of myself. Do you have a crystal ball and they can like see it? Like, how does that work?
I feel like it would be like a magical mirror would like come up into the space between myself and like the client or the person, the human that I love. Just so when they look at me, they actually see like a mirror reflection of themselves and like all the magical things about them.
Well, that is it for our questions for you, Dr. Gutierrez. We're so grateful for time and energy and sharing your story and yourself with us today. And until next time,
Last time we said toodaloo, so toodaloo.
toodaloo.